Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us once again today and welcome back. We are discussing today manpower supply versus visa facilitation services. Hello, everyone. And very much for joining us once again today back. We are So we are discussing, as I mentioned, we are discussing the manpower services versus visa facilitation services. This is topic is related to the corporate tax. This is sorry, VAT, not related to the corporate tax. These are the previous webinar that we have discussed earlier. These are the previous webinar that we discussed earlier. We have already conducted more than 60 webinars. Manpower versus visa facilitation services. This is very honestly, this is one of the, I'll say one of the oldest question in the UAE when the VAT was being implemented there. I was personally conducting so many seminars. I was conducting webinars as well. Along with this, a lot of people were asking in 2000, at the end of 2017, in the beginning of 2018. A very common question from the people were asking basically if this is one company, one person, and that one person holding multiple companies. So just look into this case. It is a one person and one person is holding multiple companies. This is a company A, assuming this is a B, this is a C. Owner is sitting here. Now this company is hiring people, and these people they are deploying here, they are deploying here. Now, assuming these three companies A, B, C are not part of the VAT group. If these are not part of the VAT group, now if this company A is hiring people and deputing to company C, and A is hiring people and deputing at company B, so what will be the VATability? The simple rule is that the outsourcing services are always subject to VAT. So we will have always asking to the owner of these three businesses A, B, C, that if the employees are on the payroll of company A, so when these people are working for B or C, so whatever is your total cost you need to charge to B, you need to charge to C as well. So if assuming this employee was getting 10,000, there are some other cost, this employee was getting 15,000. So we were asking you need to charge 15,000 plus visa services, direct cost plus any other indirect cost, air ticket, all these costs you need to charge to company B as well as you need to charge to company C as well. At the same time, owner was asking, then how is this possible? These are all three companies, these are my companies, I am the common owner. But we will say, no, you need to charge it because these are the outsourcing services are subject to tax. This question people were asking by the end of 2017 and in the beginning of 2018 when the VAT was being implemented. Okay, we have requested these people to go ahead and charge VAT on the outsourcing fee. They decided to go ahead, but the question still remain there. Now the FTA has come up with the clarification. I believe this was the clarification I personally was waiting from the day one when the VAT was being implemented there. But at the end, finally, they have decided to release the public clarification. This clarification is specifically addressed to this question. Keep in mind, all others are very normal things. So this clarification, as I said, this clarification has been introduced just to address these questions where there is a corporate group. This is the one owner. This is under the common ownership. Once this is under the common ownership, once they are under the common ownership means this is a group. This is a group and this group is not VAT group. This is a corporate group under the common ownership. So this clarification, as I mentioned earlier as well, specifically has been introduced just to address this question. We'll go through the clarification, but before going to the clarification, we'll go to the presentation that I made for you. After going through the presentation, at the end, we'll go to the clarification as usual. So first of all, we need to discuss this is what is this manpower servicing. There are two possibilities. One possibility is that the company is hiring employee and deputing him. This is the one possibility. Second possibility is that the one company is in the market, that company is just facilitating to arrange the visa. This is typical example that we discussed on the previous slide. The company is hiring here, this company is hiring people, then here this is deputing. Employees are on the payroll of this company. Generally, such types of services falls under the manpower services. Now another type of business is in the market. A lot of companies are providing PRO services. If the companies are providing PRO services, so the companies that are providing PRO services, what these companies are doing, these companies are only arranging or helping or facilitating the customer to get visa in the name of the employee of the customer. So if there are two parties here, this is the party, this is the party A, this is the party B. In the same way with the party A and party B. In the first scenario, employees are on the payroll of company A, but they are working for B. In the second scenario, A is a PRO company and B is where for the company for employees are being hired. So employees will be on the payroll and on the visa of B. So these are two general services in the market. Manpower services, visa facilitation services. Manpower services, we are recruiting, we are hunting, we are hiring, then we are deploying. These are the manpower services. What are the visa facilitation services? We are just facilitating to arrange the visa in the of the employee in the name of the company of the customer. So in this A is a PRO company, this company is arranging visa for a employee of company B. Employee will be on the payroll of the company B. These are the typically two types of services: manpower services, visa facilitation services. So for the manpower services, law is very category for the VAT law. VAT law says what are your outsourcing costs? The whole amount of consideration it will be subject to tax. For the PRO services, when this company is providing PRO services, there are usually two types of costs involved in this. One is the service charges. Okay, if we are arranging visa of an employee, we need to charge certain percentage or fixed fee. 200, 300, 500, 1000, whatever the fee we need to charge. Second thing, these are the bills. Some bills will be like medical, like typing services. Might be other bills are there. So if these bills are in the name of company B, then this company A will apply disbursement and reimbursement principle. If the bills are in the name of company B, the disbursement principle will be applicable, and in the books of company A, it will be straightforward, simple, receivable and payable. If these are the reimbursement principle, means the company A will charge VAT based upon the VAT treatment of the inline items. It means what if the items that we are getting, if these items are itself subject to tax, then the company A will charge to company B as well. So whenever these are visa facilitation services, two types of bill will be there. One will be, you can say three types of bill. One will be the service charges. A will charge to B. Second will be the bill that will be in the name of company B, but it has been paid by A, disbursement principle. Third will be the bills will be in the name of company A, but company A will, and the company A will pass on these bills to B based upon the reimbursement principle. So visa facilitation services, company will charge principally fee for the visa services, manpower supply, total outsourcing cost will be subject to tax. So if I'm asking manpower services on standalone basis, the supplier hires an employee. Yes, the supplier hires an employee. The supplier is responsible for the overall employment obligations. Third, the supplier is responsible for the employee's performance. Yes. The consideration will be total amount of consideration. It doesn't matter the customer is paying the consideration to the supplier, might be they are paying to the employee as well. This was even new thing for me. If the employee has been deputed, suppose this is the A company, this is the company C. Employee has been hired in here, employee has been deputed in C. Once the employee has been deputed at C, so there is a possibility this company C is giving any sort of remuneration to the employee directly. I will say, okay, think like this, employee is working with C, C is very happy with the performance of the employee, and C has given bonus to employee who was working with C directly to the employee. At the same time, A will be charging to C for the deployment of the resources as well. So C is paying to the employee directly, C is paying to A for the deployment. So this cost plus this cost, these two will be together and the whole amount will be subject to tax. So we need to be very careful in the future that if the company where the resource has been deployed, if that company is paying any amount directly to the employee, that amount will be subject to tax as well, and the supplier will be liable to issue the tax invoice. It will be very difficult to establish, okay, how much the company has paid, bonus value, okay, all ABC and all lot of ifs and buts are there. But the law says, the public clarification says, total amount of consideration will be subject to tax. Either this consideration is being paid to the supplier or either this consideration is being paid to the employee directly by the customer. So standalone Visa Facilitation Services, in the Visa Facilitation Services, customer hires an employee. In the previous, supplier was hiring the employee, here employee will be hired by the customer. Customer is responsible for the overall employment obligations. Customer is responsible for employee's performance. Supplier only helps to get the visa of the employee in the name of the customer. Yes. The consideration will be principally for the visa services fee. Other two type of consideration can be there as well based upon the reimbursement and disbursement principle. But primarily the consideration will be only visa services fee. These are the general rules. These are the general rules for two standalone businesses. There are no corporate group and concept in. Now we are thinking there is a corporate group. If this is a corporate group, as I discussed earlier, this clarification has only been introduced just to address one question, and that question is if the supplier and the customer, they are part of the corporate group, and one company is hiring people and deploying to other company. So they said if all these four conditions will be fulfilled, then it will be considered visa services, visa facilitation services. And if any of these conditions is not fulfilled, then it will be considered manpower supply services. So these four conditions is, all of these conditions needs to be fulfilled. The first condition, the employment visa holder, I'm going to the previous discussion that we discussed in the very beginning on the first slide. Here is a one owner. There are three companies, A, B, C. So they said employment visa holder, facilitator. Here they are part of the corporate group. A is a facilitator and B is a customer. They said the employment visa holder, the facilitator, and the customer are part of the same group. They are part of the same group we have already established. And we are assuming this for our discussion purpose. They are part of the same corporate group. The facilitator business activity do not include the supply of manpower services. This A, the business activity of A is not to supply the manpower services. Third, the facilitator is not responsible for the obligation. Usually, whatever the company on which visa you are, or the company on which visa the employees are, that company is responsible for the salaries, air ticket, all these basic charges, whatever related to the employee, the company is responsible. In this situation, the employee will be on the payroll of facilitator. Sorry, employee will be hired by facilitator A, and this employee will be deployed to B. They said in general A is responsible for the employee's obligation, but in this situation, there should be a contract between the A and B should be responsible for the employee's obligation. So first, these need to be part of the corporate group. Second, there should not be any business activity of manpower services of the facilitator A. Third, the facilitator is not responsible for the overall obligation of the employee, but the customer is responsible for the obligations of the employee. Fourth, the facilitator sponsors these employees to exclusively work for and under the supervision and control of the customers. So these people have been hired by the facilitator, which is the A, but these people will work under the supervision and control of the customer B exclusively. If all these conditions, all these four conditions are being fulfilled, then we'll say this is the Visa Facilitation Services. If any of these conditions is not being fulfilled, so we'll say this is a manpower services. So this is the same thing I mentioned here as well, that if any of these conditions is not being fulfilled, so it will be considered manpower services. Like employment visa holder and customer not part of the VAT group. If they are not part of the if they are not part of the corporate group, and facilitator and the customer, if they are not part of the corporate group, then general principle will be applicable, and general principle we have discussed in the very beginning. They will not, because these will not be considered visa facilitation services. Second, the facilitator business activity include, if their activity include the manpower, then it will be considered manpower supply. That the facilitator is responsible for obligation. If the facilitator is responsible for any obligation, then still it will be considered manpower supply. If the facilitator does not sponsor these employees to exclusively work, might be, as I mentioned, A, B, C. The facilitator has hired one employee. Sometimes the facilitator is deploying to A, then sometime to B, sometime to C, sometime to D. Then it will not be considered visa facilitation services. So facilitator has hired one person exclusively to work under the supervision and control of the customer. If this is, then it will be considered, yes, it is a visa facilitation services. So I just summarize this discussion. So manpower services versus visa facilitation. First of all, we need to look into this. Is this a standalone companies or is this a corporate group? Corporate group or standalone company? If these are standalone companies, we need to look into this one thing only. Employee is on the payroll of the supplier or employees on the payroll of the customer. If the employee is on the payroll of the customer, then it will be a visa facilitation services, PRO companies. And if the employee is on the payroll of the supplier, then it will be considered manpower supply. It will be considered outsourcing straightforward. So in the corporate group, we have discussed, if the four conditions are being fulfilled, then it will be considered visa facilitation services, and VAT will be applicable on the visa services fee only. If any of these conditions are not being fulfilled, then it will be considered manpower supply, and VAT will be applicable on the total consideration that is being received from the customer, either by the supplier, either by the employee directly. So this is the treatment. Important thing is, are you part of the corporate group or you are not part of the corporate group? So what will be the value of the supply? Till now we have discussed what are the visa facilitation services, what are the manpower supply services when they are part of the corporate group, when they are not part of the corporate group. Now the question is, what will be the value of supply? Value of supply, this is a general principle. General principle is like, if they are not related party, for sure they will be charging at the market value. Market value will be considered value of the supply. And if they are part of the, if they are related party, if they are not related party, value will be automatically at the market value, and VAT will be applicable on the market value. And if they are related party, there is a possibility that they are charged less than market value or more than the market value. In this situation, they have given straightforward clarification in the public clarification. This is a very common and obvious thing as well, that if the supplier is charging any amount to a related party which is below the market value, If the supply is below the market value, then we need to look into the two things important. A is charging to B, what is the value? Either Visa Facilitation Services or Manpower Supply Services. A is charging to B. A and B are related party. There is a possibility that A is charging lesser amount to B. Now we need to look into this. Okay, B first, the supply of B is exempt or taxable. Due to some reason, input tax is being blocked at the B or not. If B, assuming dealing with the exempt supply, like local passenger transport, assuming, or they are dealing in the residential properties. If this B and the supply of the B is exempt supply, then whatever A is charging to B, it will become out in input tax, blocked input tax of B, because B is dealing with the exempt supply. If the B is dealing with the exempt supply, any amount of VAT charged by A to B, it will be blocked at the B level. So said if this input tax will be blocked and the A is charging less than the market value, so it means A will be paying lesser output tax to the government, to the FTA. Just look into this. This is 100 is the value of the supply and 5% is the VAT, 5 is a VAT. This is the under the market. So 5 will block here. How much amount will be block here? 5. 5 become expense of B. 5 B will not be able to claim input tax. The reason is B is dealing with the exempt supplies. So this is the under the market value. So if they would have charged at the market value, assuming the market value of this supply is 500, VAT would have been 25. Here 25 would have been blocked. Now in this situation, when they have executed the transaction under the market value, 5 have been paid to the government and 5 which has not been claimed by B, mean that and when the transaction was at the market value, 25 has been paid to the government, should have been paid to the government, and 25 would have blocked at the B level. So if the transaction is being executed at the below the market value, means from at 100 instead of 500, so loss to the government is 25 state for 20 on this transaction. So they have said very clearly, if you are related party, transaction is being executed below the market value and the customer cannot claim input tax. So in this situation, the value of the transaction will be assumed at the market value and A will be liable to pay tax on a market value price, which will be 25. Now, there's some exception to this, and some exception to this is the possibility that A is not claiming input tax on the supply for which they are charging. Then, okay, if the A is not claiming input tax and A is not charging output tax, then this is very fine. No problem for it as well. So these things, as we mentioned, just we'll go through this. The value of the supply is basically meet the condition to qualify Visa Facilitation Services, taxable supply places in the UAE. Consideration will be basically what they will charge for the typing fee, medical fee, issuance of medical issuance of the employee's Emirates ID. The value of supply for the Visa Facilitation Services exclude. There are Visa Facilitation Services. This exclude basically employee salary, ticket, all these things that we already discussed. Then the fee is less than the market value. If the fee is less than the market value, they need to charge. We need to look at the related parties or not. If the related parties, it needs to be charged at the market value. Otherwise, so unless the input tax has not been claimed by the supplier. So this has been discussed in detail. So at the value of the supply, if no fee is charged, A and B are related party. If the fee has not been charged, it will be considered deemed supply. Once it will be considered deemed supply, they need to charge at the market value unless they have blocked the input tax. Input tax has not been claimed. So this is straightforward. The clarification. Now we need to go through the clarification itself. Will go through the clarification. Just give me 1 minute, please. If we're going through the clarification, Okay, if we're going through the clarification, we'll go through this clarification quickly. Issue is basically, you can go through this issue. I have already told you what was the issue. If they are part of the corporate group, do they need to treat it as a separate supply? They need to charge the VAT on the full amount, or the second question was they are part of the group and they should not treat it. Basically, you can go through this. If they say issue is they were not able to differentiate is this is supply or not. These supply can differ, be there a manpower supply, it can be considered as a visa facilitation services. In the manpower supply, you can see they said identifying, recruiting, and hiring people as well. In the visa facilitation services, they said employees service merely facilitate the visa process and employ another company without making employee available to companies are changing in the determined value of supply. This is the issue basically they were facing. As I mentioned, this is the basic. Now they have given the little bit definition as well, objective and clear, very clearly. Part of the corporate group, will it be subject to VAT or not? What is the manpower supply? Manpower supply they have defined means identifying, recruiting, hiring candidate and making these candidates available to other entity. In this, they have given basically employment visa for services, just facilitating them to hire. Then they are given the summary of the opinion. In the summary of the opinion, you can identification, recruiting generally be regarded as the supply of manpower services we have discussed. If you are basically identifying, recruiting, hiring, it generally be regarded, and the deploying, it generally be regarded as the supply of manpower services. In case of manpower services, the consideration is subject to tax the full amount. We have already discussed the full amount of consideration. Either this is being paid by the customer to the supplier, or either this is being paid by the customer directly to the employee. In both of the cases, the full amount of consideration will be subject to tax. In case of visa facilitation services, the VAT amount will be applicable on the fee that is being charged from the supplier to the customer, directly paid by the customer to the employee. You can go through this. Data detailed analysis. In the detailed analysis, just look into the manpower services. They said if you are identifying, recruiting, hiring of the candidate and making these candidates available to any other customer, generally be regarding at the supply of manpower services. Agreed. A supplier is responsible for the obligation and performance. If one company is hiring people, bringing on their payroll, then deploying to the customer, so supplier will be responsible for hiring, identifying, hiring, recruiting, deploying, managing performance. Employees obligation means paying them salary, paying them air ticket, all these things supplier will be responsible. And whatever the amount of consideration that is being charged, that will be subject to tax. Like you can go through this example. The supplier, the supplier, the supplier sends employee to another company. Customer, the supplier is responsible for ensuring the employees performing these duties for the customer, including ensuring quality of the work performed. Supplier is responsible for agreeing the terms of the employment is fine. So value of the manpower services, value of the supply of the manpower, the consideration will be full consideration will be subject to tax that we already discussed. The consideration of the employees include the full amount received, expected to be received by the supplier from the customer, that is either recharged to the customer or directly paid to the employee. This is very important, such as salaries or wages. It doesn't matter. If the customer is paying to the supplier, whatever the customer is paying to the employee, the full amount of consideration that you are paying or you are expected to pay, might be you have some sort of contract, might be you will be paying in the future. We need to consider the time of supply of the services. The full amount of consideration will be subject to tax. So for the manpower services, this is company A hold the employment visa for employees working for company B. Company A make these employees available to B, and hence company A is regarding as supplying manpower services. In this situation, A and B, A is hiring people, recruiting people, identifying people, then deploying at B. So it will be assumed that A is providing the manpower services to B. The consideration for supply of manpower services equal to the total amount incurred by B. Total amount, either to B, either B this is being paid to A or either this is being paid to the employee directly. Total amount will be subject to tax. So visa facilitation services. For the visa facilitation services, this line is very important. This These words are very important. Though what they said basically, they said if one company is identifying, recruiting, hiring, and deploying employee, it will be considered manpower services. As an exception to this, they said this will be considered visa facilitation services. So when this will be considered visa facilitation services, when the facilitator, the four conditions that we have already discussed, they are part of the VAT, they are part of the corporate group. They know business activity in the trade license of the facilitator to supply the manpower services. Customer is responsible for the overall obligation of the employees, and the facilitator is sponsoring people exclusively work for under the supervision of the customer. If these conditions are being fulfilled, then they said it will be considered visa facilitation services. And they said if all of these requirements to be fulfilled. So the first is corporate group. In the corporate group, if they are common ownership, it will be considered corporate group. If the facilitator is a part of the VAT group, okay, then there is no question of VAT applicable. There is a possibility that A and B are part of the VAT group. Then, as per the UE VAT law, if they are part of the group, whatever the supply of the service, it will not be assumed. So it will be out of the scope supply. It will not be a taxable supply. So this is the first condition. Basically, they are under the common group. Second, no supply of manpower services. The business activity will need to go to the trade license of the facilitator. There should not be any activity to supply the manpower services. If this activity is there, then it will be considered manpower supply services. Employees' obligations. This is important. Employees' obligations usually are to make the payment of salary to the employee, like benefits to the employee, flight allowances, the provision of medical insurance. This is usually the responsibility of the company which is hiring employee. But this is in this situation, this liability, this obligation has been shifted to the customer. As a part of this facilitation, the customer takes the responsibility. Customer takes the responsibility for these obligations. So responsibility has been shifted from the supplier to the customer, and this should be an agreement in between the two parties. So this is the third condition. The fourth condition is supervision controlled by the customer. At the end, customer is making supervision control, and this person has been work exclusively for the customer, employing them exclusively for work for the customer. As I mentioned, you cannot say, okay, at the same time, the employee will be working for A, B, C, D in the same group, even it doesn't, it's specifically and exclusively if this is the A to B, the employee has been deployed to B, hired for B, and this is working for B under supervision of B. Even this is a company C, which is a part of the same corporate group, and the employees going in C, this condition will be violated, keep in mind. When employees exclusively work for the customer under the customer supervision, please note the employee perform either he work under the duties of the customer. Okay, you can go through. Just look into this example. Company A holds employment visa for person working for company B. A is holding visa for B. A and B are part of the same corporate group. As part of the A's operation, it also provides secondment services to businesses outside. Though they are providing outside secondment as well. If they are providing outside secondment, means these business activities to provide the manpower services. If they are providing secondment outside, they said it will not be considered visa facilitation services. Then it will be considered supply of manpower services, because out of the four conditions, the second condition has been violated. Visa facilitation provided by the company it does not qualify because the second condition has been violated. Out of the four conditions that we discussed above, this condition has been violated. If this condition has been violated, means it will not be considered that it is supply of visa facilitation service. It will be considered supply of manpower services. In the same way, company A provides support services to company B, same corporate group, including bookkeeping, payment processing. This company is responsible limited to arrange for the visa issuance, including medical test. Okay, it seems everything is fine till now. So company B entered into contractual arrangement with a new employee and is responsible for the payment of the salary. benefits, and maintains supervision. All the conditions are being fulfilled. So A is regarded as providing the visa facilitation services to B. That is very fine. So visa facilitation services, value of the supply. Value of the supply, it all depends, as we discussed earlier. They are the related party once they are, because this is for sure they are the related party because they are part of the same corporate group. If they are part of the same corporate group, means they are the related parties. In case of related party, we need to look into this. Is this being charged below the market value, above the market value? If this is below the market value, then we need to look into this. The customer input tax will be blocked or not. So at the end, crux is we need to charge at the market value. If the supply made by a facilitator meet the condition qualify visa facilitation service, this supply will be regarded as taxable supply. Okay, is fine. The facilitator generally required to impose VAT on the value of supply, of course. The amount charged for the services, okay, is visa facility amount charged for the services. It will include typing fee, medical fee. These three fees will be included while charging any fee to the customer. So typing fee, medical fee, issuance of emergency ID, this should be at the market value. The value of supply visa facilitation services exclude the employee salary. This will employed, and this will be because this is the responsibility of the customer to pay to the employee. So it will not be charged by the supplier to the customer or to the from the facilitator to the customer. Now the following special calculation rules. Okay, you can go through this. Related party. Related party we have discussed, since the first condition of visa facilitation service supply must be made within the VAT group. Special valuation rules applies if the facilitator does not charge at the market value. I just wanted to give you the heads up. Now the corporate tax has been introduced in the UE as well, as we know this. So corporate tax requires the supply between the related parties should be at the market value. So this supply for sure will be at the market value. So still VAT law has a separate requirement, corporate tax law has a separate requirement. Corporate tax law requires supply between the service should be at the market value. VAT law says if the input tax is being blocked by the customer, then should be a market value. So again, we'll go through this. They said a special valuation rule apply if the facilitator does not charge a market related fee. If the facilitator charge a fee that is less than the market value, customer is not entitled to fully recover input tax is the market value. Important. This is very important. I already discussed through the example. If the input tax is being blocked at the customer level, might be the customer is in the any business where the input tax is being blocked, like local passenger transport, input tax is blocked, it will be lost to the government. To avoid this loss, law requires clarification required. We need to charge at the market value. At the same time, corporate tax law requires as well that we need to make this supply at the market value. In such situation, the facility is required to impose VAT on the market value of the supply, regardless of the actual amount charged for the facility. Whatever you are getting, it doesn't matter, but you will be liable to pay VAT at the market value. If the facilitator charges a fee that is equal to the market value, then there is no issue. It's fine. So value of supply, no fee is charged. There is a possibility that the facilitator is not charging any fee. If the facilitator is not charging any fee, it will be considered deemed supply if the facilitator has already claimed the input tax. And if the facilitator has not claimed the input tax, then we will not consider it a deemed supply. Now the question arises, if the facilitator is okay, if the facilitator has claimed input tax, and now it will be considered deemed supply. So what will be the value of the supply? The law says the value of the supply will be equal to the total cost, direct and indirect cost proportionately. Either the supplier should not claim input tax, then this is fine if they are not charging. If the supplier has claimed input tax, so they need to pay output tax at least on the total cost of the supply. So there should not be any loss to the FTA. There should not be any loss to the government. Might be you are claiming more, paying less. No, this is not acceptable. Whatever you are claiming, at least you need to pay that. So this is the logic behind this. So if the provide visa facilitation service to the customer to no charge, supply will be considered deemed supply. The supply should not be regarded as deemed supply. The facility does not recover the input tax. If the facilitator recover input tax to supply visa facility, the facilitator will be required to account for the VAT tax due based upon the total cost incurred. I told you the logic basically. 100 is the cost, 5 is your input tax. The at least 100 should be the output tax. Input tax and output tax will nullify each other. At least there should not be any loss to the, I mean, short paid or output to the FTA. So this is the logic. So what is the direct cost? They have given basically including typing fee, logistic fee, indirect cost proportionate, office rent, utilities. In instances where the facilitator is unable to calculate the cost, you can say, okay, tomorrow if the FT is conducting your audit, if they are asking, oh, why have you not paid VAT? You are saying, okay, you are not able to determine the direct cost and indirect cost. Then they have given, okay, if you can't ascertain this, then you need to charge at the market value. And market value, this will be for sure, it will be higher than the cost of the product. Means your output tax will be higher than your input tax. This is over from my side. If you have any question, you are most welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with me. What is the corporate tax? A group, this is not group for corporate. No. This is nothing to do with the corporate tax. Corporate group, I have already defined, means under the common ownership, nothing more than this. Even we have started our discussion from the first slide. I said there is one common owner of company ABC or corporate group. There is nothing to do with the corporate tax. Any other question, guys? Okay. In case of manpower supply, if the customer pays bonus directly to the employee, how will the supplier settle this invoice balance with the employee as the supplier did not receive the amount? This is a very genuine question. This is what I was thinking as well. But the law requires whatever the consideration is being paid, even this is being paid to the employee or this is being paid to the employer, the whole amount will subject to tax. So principally, what are the amount that is being paid to the employee, for that the supplier needs to issue an invoice in the name of the customer. This should be the proper treatment. Tomorrow one can argue with the government, with the FTA as well, whatever being paid to the employee bonus is out of scope. No, this is not a bonus which is out of scope. This is a consideration that is being paid for the deployment of the employee from the supplier to the customer. So whatever the consideration that is being paid to the employer directly, principally supplier needs to issue a tax invoice in the name of the customer. Any other question? No? Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thank you and have a lovely evening. Thank you for being with me. Thank you.